Revenge Films.
My name is Thomas Smith. I work at a telecommunications company in the sales department. I have a girlfriend named Rachel. She's the same age as me, and I recently proposed to her. We became engaged, and she was then my fiancé. I met Rachel back when we were both in college, and about 3 years after we started dating, we decided to get married, and I proposed. Once we graduated from college and I started working at my job, that's when we moved in together. After we started discussing marriage, we went to meet each other's families. We both had good relationships with one another's parents, so when it was decided that we would get married, both of our families were really happy for us and welcomed the marriage. I love Rachel, but there were some parts of her that were a little bit airheaded. She was somebody who had strong opinions and was stubborn about them as well. Because of that, there were often times that she would have misunderstandings, and without realizing that she was misunderstanding, she would continue running with that thought. But I loved Rachel, and I wanted to protect her, and my feelings toward her were strong. So, even after we got married, I wanted to continue to support her and be by her side. Now that we were engaged, our preparations for the wedding were moving forward smoothly. Before we even realized it, time had flown by and it was already the day before our wedding. I was working up until the wedding, and even on the day before I was in the office. But I made sure not to work overtime that day and went home as early as possible. When I got back home, Rachel was sitting on the couch. As soon as she saw me, she said,
Thomas, there's something I need to talk to you about.
And looked down. I asked her, "What's the matter? What's wrong?" But then Rachel responded,
I'm sorry, but I'm calling off the engagement and the wedding. My soulmate proposed to me, and I'm going to marry him.
It was a shocking confession, and I didn't know what to say. Does that mean that you were cheating on me? When I asked her that, she replied,
We haven't done anything yet, but yesterday he said we should get married, and I said yes.
I struggled to understand or wrap my head around the situation. Who is this guy? I need you to explain more in detail. I'm not understanding. When I said that, Rachel then started talking about everything that happened up until the moment she decided to call off the engagement. With the wedding coming up soon, yesterday Rachel had gone out for drinks with her friend as a final celebration of her single life. After dinner, they went to another spot, and at that bar, she said that she ran into her soulmate. Like I said, who is that soulmate? Who the hell is he? When I confronted her about it, she seemed like she was struggling to talk about it, but said,
It's somebody that you know really well, Kevin.
That was all she said, so I pushed even further, and then Rachel finally spat out,
It's Michael. Michael is the one that proposed to me yesterday.
That was all she said. And when I heard that, without thinking, I yelled out, You're joking, right? I couldn't believe it. I did know Michael very well. That's because he was my best friend from back in high school, and we were even on the same soccer team together. Michael was good-looking, and he dressed well. He was the type to be popular with all of the girls, but he was far from the player type. He was an honest and serious guy. When Rachel and I first started dating, we went over to Michael's house a number of times together. The first time that Rachel met Michael, I remember her saying,
Michael, you're a really good-looking guy.
I distinctly remember that moment. But Michael had a girlfriend that he had been dating ever since high school, and I knew that girlfriend well, too. The three of us were always hanging out together. I knew how serious Michael was, so there was no way that he would cheat on his girlfriend. And more than anything, I knew that Michael would never go after his best friend's girlfriend. There was no way, and I trusted Michael. Because of that, I had no doubt that it was Rachel's misunderstanding that Michael proposed to her yesterday. no matter how many times I tried to explain to Rachel. I know that Michael has a girlfriend that he's been dating for many years, so this has to be some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe you misheard him. But even if I said that to her, she insisted.
There's no way that's true. I know for a fact that he proposed to me.
And she refused to listen to anything I had to say. But even still, I desperately tried to explain to her that that must still be a misunderstanding. But then, Rachel lost her temper and started yelling at me.
That's enough already. Do you not realize how much better looking Michael is than you? If somebody that wonderful proposed, well, yeah, any girl would want to call off their engagement to someone like you. Anyway, I'm gonna go to Michael's house now. I'm gonna be with my soulmate, so stop pulling me back anymore.
Those were her last words, and she stormed out of the house. I never could have imagined in my wildest dreams that the day before my wedding things were going to turn out this way. I was devastated towards Rachel and about this situation. We had dated for 3 years and we were even going to get married tomorrow. But I couldn't believe that she would have a change of heart this easily. I was so devastated I didn't know what to do. I stared at the marriage certificate that we were planning on filling out tomorrow morning and turning into the city office before the wedding. And that was when I decided that I was going to part ways with Rachel. But first, more than anything, I felt like I needed to ask Michael for his side of the situation. So I ended up following out the door after Rachel, and I headed toward Michael's house. As I was heading over there, I received a message from Rachel.
Hey, which one was Michael's apartment building? I'm sure that I'm nearby, but I can't remember which exact building it is.
But I ignored that message, and knowing that she wasn't there yet, I hurried so that I would get to Michael's apartment before Rachel could get there. As soon as I got to his apartment, I rushed to ring the doorbell. Michael looked shocked when he opened up the front door. And then he said, "This is rare for you to show up here without at least calling me first." He looked confused, so I replied, "It's a little bit of an emergency. Can I come in?" I asked him to go inside, and then we locked the door. And straight off the bat, I asked him, "Hey, Michael, you didn't propose to marry Rachel yesterday, did you?" When I asked him that, Michael burst out laughing. "Rachel? As in your girlfriend, Rachel? Cut it out with those jokes! Tomorrow is your wedding, isn't it?" he replied. But when I explained the situation to him, Michael said that he had no recollection of seeing Rachel yesterday, and he seemed creeped out. I told him that Rachel was insisting that she saw him at a bar yesterday and that he proposed to her. But then Michael said, "Well, the one truth to that is that I was at a bar with my girlfriend yesterday. While we were there, we were talking about our marriage, but obviously there's no way on earth that I would propose to your girlfriend, is there?" He seemed confused as well. At that moment, the doorbell to Michael's apartment rang. When we looked at the security screen standing there, it was Rachel. Through the monitor, Michael pressed the talk button and said, "Yes, hello?" To which Rachel started saying,
Hey, Michael, you can let me inside. I just broke up with Thomas a second ago, so let's continue our conversation from yesterday about getting married.
When he heard that, Michael started to shake, and he replied to her, "Our conversation from yesterday? What are you talking about?" When he said that, Rachel didn't seem fazed and said,
Don't you remember? You were saying that we should have the wedding in Hawaii.
She said. At that moment, Michael cut off the monitor and turned to me and said, "I was talking to my girlfriend about that yesterday, but it looks like she thinks it's about her. This is crazy. This is terrifying." Michael was shocked. When we looked back up the monitor to see what she was doing, Rachel was waving her hands in front of it, saying,
Hurry up and open the door. Let's plan the details of our wedding.
That's what she was saying, so this time I spoke. Hey, it's me, Thomas, but you've had a huge misunderstanding. Then Rachel seemed flustered.
Thomas, why are you here? I told you not to pull me back anymore, didn't I?
And she started to throw a tantrum. Even when I told her that the discussion about the wedding was what Michael was talking to his girlfriend about and that Rachel had a misunderstanding, she refused to listen in any way whatsoever. Even though Michael and I tried to explain to her multiple times together that she was misunderstanding, Rachel started to panic and said,
Well then, what am I supposed to do? I already broke up with Thomas, so you should be taking responsibility for this. Break up with your girlfriend and get married to me.
This time she was saying these ridiculous things. Michael lost his temper and said, Are you kidding me? That's enough already. I'm getting married to my girlfriend. I'm definitely not getting married to you. When he raised his voice, Rachel started sobbing on the spot. But then, one of the residents of the apartment saw that and reported it to the police, and the situation turned into a huge commotion. When the police arrived, Rachel went into even more of a panic and started going crazy. It was a situation that nobody could handle, so we had to contact Rachel's parents. When they ran to the scene and we explained the situation to them, they seemed over it. Her parents apologized to Michael and I, and they started speaking to Rachel. Now that her parents had arrived, Rachel started to calm down. The police issued her a stern warning, and they left. Then, Rachel turned to me and said,
Okay, I understand now that it was my misunderstanding. Let's get married as planned tomorrow.
She said to me. However, after already seeing such a horrible sight in front of me, I had already lost all desire to get married to her. Get married? Obviously, there's no way I'm gonna do that. And I quickly denied her. Rachel seemed shocked.
What? Are you saying that you're going to cancel the wedding? I can't believe you would cancel the day before. That's unbelievable.
When she said that, I replied, Who's the one that went and had a change of heart and said they wanted to call off the engagement and the wedding in the first place? There's no way that I would be able to marry a woman like that. When I said that, Rachel's parents started to panic and they tried to convince me otherwise. But no matter what they said to me, I told them that my feelings weren't going to change, so I declared that the wedding was going to be canceled and the engagement was called off. Rachel was crying and said,
I just got a little bit lost with my feelings, that's all. Please, forgive me.
But I ignored her and replied, You're the one that said you didn't want to get married tomorrow, so I'm gonna leave the cancellation fees to you. And then I went home alone. The next day, I sent all of Rachel's belongings to her family's house, and I contacted my friends and family that the wedding had been canceled. Everybody was shocked, but when I explained the situation to them, everyone took my side and sympathized with me. After that, Rachel was left having to pay the full amount for the venue cancellation fee, and because she didn't have enough in her savings, she had to borrow money from her parents. Every time she tried to apologize to my family or to the friends we had invited, they all looked at her with cold eyes, and nobody wanted to be associated with her anymore. Her parents said that they couldn't let her in the wild anymore, so they forced her to stay in the family house. She wasn't allowed to leave the family house after that, and she is still holed up at home. She wasn't allowed to work, and she couldn't go out to play either, and so she would never be able to get a boyfriend again and would lead a boring life. As for me, after breaking up with Rachel, I had a lot of time on my hands. I decided to try messing around with cryptocurrency, but I earned a shocking amount, and I was able to start living in a luxury building. Now that I had money, I was fully enjoying a comfortable life and plan on doing so alone for a while. I've had enough of being thrown around by a woman, so for the time being, I want to enjoy my life freely. Back then, I was still in high school. My family was just my mom, my 2 younger brothers who were in elementary school, and me. When I was in middle school, my dad cheated on my mom and disappeared. Ever since, my mom had been raising us on her own. But it's not like she had a college degree or anything, so the best she could do was part-time jobs. Even so, she'd leave for work early in the morning, come home in the evening to make us dinner, and then head out again for a night shift that lasted until late. When I got to high school, I started working part-time too to help out. But even then, things were rough. After pushing herself for years without rest, my mom eventually collapsed from exhaustion. Once we lost her income, we had to survive on government support and whatever I could make from my part-time job. We were basically living in poverty. I couldn't afford to buy anything for myself, my shoes were falling apart, and all my stuff was worn out. There was this guy in my class who loved to make fun of me for it. He and his group of friends were total jerks.
Hey, you're eating just bread and milk again? Oh, right, guess that's all you can afford.
He'd laugh. He was one of the popular kids, the kind everyone called part of the in crowd. He'd always use me as the punchline to his jokes. He'd say things like,
Hey, Dan, we're all going to karaoke later. Wanna come? Oh, wait, never mind. You're broke, right?
Then he'd laugh with his buddies. But the truth was, yes, I was broke, and I didn't have time for stuff like that anyway. Between paying for my mom's hospital bills and taking care of my hungry little brothers, every spare second I had went to working. I lost all my friends. Honestly, I wanted to quit school so many times, but with Mom in the hospital, I knew I had to at least graduate high school, even if college wasn't an option. So I kept pushing through school alone, working part-time every chance I got. But during my second year, right before our class trip, that same jerk came up to me with a smug grin on his face.
Hey, the class trip's coming up soon, but you're not going, right? I mean, you're broke, aren't you? Actually, why are you even still coming to school? What's the point? If you can't even afford the tuition, you should just drop out already.
I had held it together until then, but that day something inside me broke. I couldn't take it anymore, and I dropped out of school. After that, I told my mom the truth. I started working even more shifts. My mom cried and blamed herself. But honestly, once I quit, it felt like a weight had lifted. I could finally just focus on surviving. From then on, I threw myself into work. It wasn't easy, but I met some truly kind people along the way, and just like that, 10 years passed. Then one day, my family told me a postcard had arrived for me. It was an invitation to a class reunion. Even though I never graduated, they'd still sent one to me. Something about it felt off, like there was an ulterior motive, but I figured, why not go? It had been a long time. When I showed up at the izakaya pub that night, the moment I stepped inside, guess who came rushing over with that same fake energy?
Yo, long time no see, Dan. How have you been?
It was that jerk again, still acting way too familiar after 10 years. Then he said, laughing like he always did,
I was worried about you, man. I mean, you dropped out 'cause you were poor, right? I thought maybe you died in some ditch or something. Oh, hey, you got money for tonight? If not, I can cover you.
And just like that, I realized that 10 years had passed, but this guy hadn't changed a bit. not one bit. The guys who used to hang around that jerk were still close with him, apparently. They chimed in and laughed right along with him, just like old times. But then, someone cut in.
Wait, wasn't Dan on TV recently?
The whole room paused. The jerk scoffed and waved it off, and he was like, "What? Him? No way, you're joking." But the girl who'd spoken pulled out her phone and showed us the photo, and there I was. The jerk leaned in to look, and his face froze, and he was asking why I was on the TV. So I just smiled and told him what I do now. After I dropped out of high school, I started working part-time at a construction company. That's where I discovered my passion for building houses. I started reading books and teaching myself everything I could about architecture and design. One day, the company president pulled me aside. He told me he saw potential in me and that I should aim to get my high school equivalency and go for an architect license, even if it took time. It sounded amazing, but I told him it was impossible. I didn't have that kind of money. He just laughed and said, "Pay me back when you make it," and he covered everything. So I studied while I worked. Bit by bit, I earned my architect license. As I took on more projects, ideas started coming to me, and I found real joy in creating things. My work started getting noticed. Eventually, I even got commissions from overseas. Hearing all that, the jerk went pale. He looked like he couldn't believe a word of it. Then more former classmates chimed in, and they were like, "I saw you on TV too. I'm actually looking to buy a house right now." And they started gathering around me. Looking frustrated, the jerk suddenly snapped.
So what if you can design a house? You're still just a broke loser. Once poor, always poor. I work for a major company, Psychic Corp. Ever heard of it?
Just as he finished shouting that, the door to the izakaya pub opened, and in walked a new customer. The moment the jerk saw the man's face, all the color drained from his own.
Sir? I mean, President?
The man, clearly the company president, gave the jerk a brief nod and then turned toward me with a big smile. "Ah, Dan, how's your father doing? And I heard your wife's expecting soon. Congratulations! Also, I've been following your success in the US. Sounds like you're doing amazing work." The jerk's eyes darted back and forth between me and the president. He was completely panicking. Sensing what was going on, the president kindly explained it to the room. As it turns out, my wife is the daughter of the company president who once helped me. I met her while I was working hard to earn my qualifications. And this president, the one from Psychic Corp, is an old family friend of my father-in-law. He'd even visited their house several times. So, through my father-in-law, he already knew a bit about my background and what I'd overcome. He deeply respected that I had risen up from hardship, never giving up on life, and managed to find success through determination and effort. When the jerk heard that I'd not only become independent from my father-in-law's company, but that my wife and I had now relocated to the US and were receiving international commissions, he was left completely speechless, mouth wide open, frozen. In other words, I wasn't poor anymore, not even close. After giving a quick explanation, the president said, "Didn't mean to interrupt your reunion," and headed to a private room in the back. The jerk just sat there in shock, his soul seemingly having left his body. He stayed like that, totally hollow, until the reunion ended. After the reunion ended, I heard from another classmate sometime later that the jerk really was working at that major company, but apparently he was always at the bottom of the performance rankings, and there were even rumors he was on the chopping block for layoffs. In fact, he had a fiancé at one point too, but she ended things, saying she couldn't marry someone with such an uncertain future. After that, his little posse started drifting away, and now he's pretty much isolated. So, yeah, he tried to come at me, flex, and make me the laughingstock after 10 years, and ended up destroying himself instead. Classic. A lot happened over those 10 years. My father-in-law, the man who supported me, even covered my mom's hospital bills at one point. Thanks to him, she made a full recovery and is doing well now. Back then, my little brothers were still kids, but they worked hard in school so they wouldn't be a burden on me. In the end, they both earned scholarships, graduated from college, found great jobs, and started their own families. Even after my wife and I relocated to the US, I kept sending money home to Mom. These days my brothers do too. She tells me she's fine on her own now and doesn't need the support anymore. But the three of us all feel the same. We just want to give back to the woman who gave everything for us. We won't stop, even though it kind of overwhelms her. Then, about 6 months after the reunion, I heard a rumor. Apparently, that jerk who mocked me so hard that night got laid off from his job not long after. They even kicked him out of the company apartment. He's been applying to other places, but nothing's worked out so far. From what I heard, he's living in a run-down apartment now, scraping by with part-time gigs. Who would have thought his life would end up like that? Back then, none of us could have seen it coming, but that's life, isn't it? You just never know where the road will take you. My name is Kevin Smith. I work at a company. I live together with my wife, Sarah. It's been about 2.5 years since we got married, but we don't have any children yet. That's not because we didn't want to have children. When we first got married, we had planned to enjoy our newlywed lives together for about a year, and then we wanted to start trying for a baby. However, my wife had an illness that she was born with, and she was the one that started to say to me,
I feel like I'm still not 100% well and that my body isn't great. I'm worried, so I want you to wait a little bit longer until we have kids.
When she said that to me, I had no choice but to be patient and wait. Even though it was a born illness, it wasn't anything too serious. We spoke to her doctor about it, and they said that as long as she was maintaining her health, it would be more than possible for her to give birth. And so, for over a year after we got married, I was going to have to wait even longer until we could start trying for a baby. But I thought that there was nothing I could do about it. On the other hand, I couldn't help but to feel suspicions about my wife's attitude. In reality, in the last 1.5 years, her affection and feelings toward me had clearly drastically fallen. But because of what she was saying about her health, I figured that it was just being influenced by her health at the time. Then one day, while I was at the office in the middle of the workday, I got a phone call from my wife.
I went out to do the groceries and then I started feeling unwell. So when I stopped by the hospital, they said I needed to be hospitalized. That's why I'm asking if you can bring me my pajamas and other necessary items to the hospital for me.
I explained the situation to my company and I rushed to leave. I left work early that day and I went home. I went to do as she said and went looking for the necessary items that she asked for. However, I was having a hard time finding the pajamas. Normally, whenever my wife was going to have to spend a few days in the hospital, we would know about it in advance. Because of that, she was always the one to take them out herself. I didn't know where her pajamas were, so I opened up her closet, and there I found her pajamas. They were old, and she had always been wearing them. She probably stopped using that pair and had to put them away. Huh? Wait, but what are all of these letters? In the back of my wife's closet, I found a stack of mysterious letters. They were placed away as if she was trying to hide them.
What are these letters? Come on! Why would they be tucked away in a place like this?
It seemed unnatural. However, I didn't think it was right to open up those letters that weren't mine and tucked away, so I decided not to touch them. I simply grabbed the items that she had asked for, and I ran to the hospital to give them to my wife. The moment my wife saw those old pajamas, she was shocked and started sweating.
What? The fact that you pulled out these pajamas, does that mean that you went into my closet and looked inside?
Yeah, that's right. I found them there.
I can't believe that you opened up a woman's closet without her permission. You're the worst. Surely you didn't look inside and snoop around, did you?
It was rare for my wife to raise her voice like this in such an angry way. I tried to calmly reply, "No, of course I wouldn't snoop around in your closet."
Right. I see.
My wife was clearly flustered.
Why is she panicking and so flustered? Oh, wait a minute. Could it have something to do with those letters? If there's something about that stack of letters.
After I dropped off the items and I got home from the hospital, I couldn't help but be bothered by the stack of letters I saw in my wife's closet. If my wife hadn't seemed so panicked when I brought those pajamas, I don't think I would have thought twice to open up those letters. But I went into the closet and I grabbed the stack. There were approximately 40 envelopes there.
If nothing seems suspicious about these and they seem like normal letters, I'm going to immediately stop reading them and put them back where they belong.
I noticed that all the letters were international and they were all sent by the same person. I looked at the name and it belonged to a Japanese man. I could even see the date of the letters, and there were some that dated back about a year after we got married, up until pretty recently. I noticed that the exchanges began around the time that my wife had started using her health as a reason to extend wanting a baby. And then, at that moment, I remembered that right around that time, my wife and I had gotten into a big argument.
You're the one that lost an invoice that was addressed to me. I don't want you to touch the mail ever again. I don't trust you with it anymore.
I didn't know what she was talking about, and I didn't remember doing anything of that sort. But my wife was yelling at me. I knew that if I were to anger her too much, it would be bad for her health. So, at that time, I simply apologized and backed down. And then I promised her that I would never go out to get the mail ever again. That argument was when those letters seemed to start. Now that I think about it, she probably made up that incident, and it was her plan to make sure that I would never take notice of these letters that were being sent to our house. When I opened up one of the envelopes, just as I expected, they were all letters from a man that she was having an affair with. They all said similar things like, "I love you," or "Let's run away and get married." Amongst them, I also saw some words that said, "I know I said this to you in a message, but," which made me quickly realize that they were probably having communication that wasn't only through these written letters. As I continued to read the letters, I also found out that every single time this man was returning into the country, they would meet up secretly and go to hotels together. He had even written poems about his thoughts when they made love together in the bed, and it made me want to throw up. With this, I was certain that my wife was having an affair. I started to feel stupid that I vowed to support my sickly wife for the rest of my life and devote my life to her. I was doing everything around the house because I didn't want her to deal with the stress of doing the chores. But because that meant she had more time on her hands, she was having an affair. And not only that, but it was clear that my wife and this man were treating me like I was the one that was in the way. She was saying that she was apart from this man that she was in love with, and she was stuck living with her husband that she didn't even like. and that she was living a difficult, everyday life. When I found out that that's how the two of them were thinking of me, I could feel the anger boiling inside of me. While my wife was hospitalized, I didn't go to visit her once. And after 2 days of not visiting her, I received a phone call from Sarah.
Hey, Kevin, why haven't you come and checked on me in the hospital? There are a number of things that I want to discuss with you that I need to talk to you about in detail. Why haven't you come?
Wait, did I say that I would come visit you in the hospital? I don't recall that.
Excuse me? Your wife is hospitalized right now and can't come home. Isn't it a given that you should be coming every day to visit me here? And first of all, every time that I've been hospitalized up until now, you would come and visit me every day anyway. There are things I want you to buy for me, so hurry up and get here.
But the hospital is near your parents' house. Why don't you ask your parents? And then I hung up the phone. In the years that I've known her, I had never once taken this kind of attitude with her, and that must have been shocking to her. About an hour passed by, and I received a message from my wife that seemed careful and cautious, completely different from her tone on the phone.
Was I a little bit too harsh when I was talking to you? I'm sorry about that. You can come whenever, now or later, but please come.
I decided to ignore that message, and I decided that I was going to get a divorce. It seems that my wife was trying to keep hiding her affair with this other man and continue on with her married life with me. I'm not gonna let them get away with this. I'm definitely gonna make them pay a settlement fee. From there, I hired a detective agency, and I also went to discuss the situation with a lawyer. According to the letters that I found, the man was on an overseas assignment for business, but that was about to finish, and he would be coming back into the country pretty soon. Around that time, my wife was released from the hospital. Together with her parents, they stormed into our home, and the three of them were furious, asking me why I didn't come to visit my wife and take care of her. I apologized. I had no choice because until I had concrete evidence of the affair in my hands, it would be bad for my wife to suspect that I was onto her. So I had to play along.
You know that I was born with this illness, don't you? You should be taking better care of me. Next time, if you don't come visit me, I'm not going to accept that.
I had no feelings for my wife anymore. Perhaps because of that, I noticed that my wife was using that illness as an excuse to throw me around. I don't think she was like this before we got married. Then, the man came back to the country. My wife was going to multiple hotels with this man, and we got plenty of evidence. Not long after that, suddenly, my wife handed me divorce papers. This is coming out of nowhere. What's the reason? I pretended not to know anything, and I asked her.
The reason is what happened when I was hospitalized before. You didn't come to visit me, did you? And with that, all of my feelings towards you instantly disappeared. This is all your fault.
Is that so? So what are you planning on doing after the divorce?
I haven't decided anything yet. I'm gonna find somebody better now.
It seems that she was planning on acting dumb and getting a divorce without paying any settlement fee. You're gonna find somebody now? But you already have a boyfriend. What's wrong with him?
What? How do you know about that?
I showed all evidence of the affair, and I made her promise to bring him and have a discussion together. On the day of, my wife and I, and her boyfriend and the lawyer, the four of us, gathered. The man had a sharp look on his face and said, "Sarah and I are in love, so please acknowledge our relationship." I understand the situation. However, you're already dating, aren't you? That means that you're having an affair. That's why. It's not like we can just break up. The man then cut me off. "Obviously, I know that. So please take this. Here's the settlement fee." The man threw an envelope onto the table. The envelope was clearly super thin. Without thinking, I asked, how much is in this envelope? Settlement fee, $1,000. I coughed, and I could feel tears forming by my eyes. My wife and her boyfriend seemed to misunderstand that I started crying because I was so sad about the divorce. So please, just accept the $1,000.
That's right. I also ended up lying a number of times, so don't hesitate. Just take it.
One after another, they said that to me. We're getting a divorce. However, I'm not going to accept this $1,000. And I rejected it. When my wife and her boyfriend left, I laughed out loud. Do those two seriously think that they can get out of this with just $1,000 settlement fee? The lawyer and I couldn't help but to burst out laughing. And so, I got a divorce. And I collected a settlement fee of $30,000 each from my ex-wife and her boyfriend. The record, as for the separation of assets after consideration of her treatment fees, they ended up being nothing. She then called me saying that the settlement fee was too high and she was shocked, but I laughed again. Sorry to shock you, you thought that you could settle it with $1,000, but you have to pay $60,000. Of course you'd be shocked. Because my ex-wife and her boyfriend were going to need $59,000 more than they thought, I heard that they got into a huge fight. In the end, because of those arguments, apparently they broke up. My ex-wife is living with her parents, working part-time jobs, and trying to pay back her debt every day.
When I was little, my father left us. He had another woman and even had kids with her. I found out later that he kept our existence a secret from them, the woman, her parents, his employees, even the neighbors. So I took some paperwork and a voice recorder and went to see him. I went there to ask for child support. When I showed up, he just stared at me, totally blank. It wasn't until I mentioned my mom's name that he finally said,
"Oh."
Like he barely remembered her, and I said, "I'm here to talk about child support." He looked genuinely confused and asked,
"Why now?"
That look on his face, like it didn't make any sense to him, made me feel a kind of anger I can't describe. How could this man have absolutely no idea? The fact that I share blood with someone like him makes me sick. Clearly, he never thought about the kids he walked out on. Originally, I planned to just talk about the money and leave. I didn't think of him as my father, and honestly, I wanted nothing to do with him. But then I saw the life he'd built, calm, happy, ordinary, like nothing had ever happened, and I couldn't stay quiet. Before I knew it, the words just came out of my mouth. My mom died from cancer. She suffered so much and couldn't even get proper treatment. He froze, speechless, just stood there in shock. All those years while Mom and I struggled just to survive, he was here living a normal life. He had 3 more kids, opened a business, built a whole new life. You cheated on your wife, got another woman pregnant, and kicked your family out for just $9,400 without even dividing the assets or paying child support. While Mom was dying, you were living like nothing happened. How does that feel? Does that make you happy? I told him about Mom's illness, our life after he left, just let it all out. I said things to hurt him, vile things even. I had meant to stay calm, make my case, then leave, but once I started talking, I couldn't hold back. At some point, I was screaming and crying. I don't even remember exactly what I said in the second half. He broke down sobbing. The woman just kept saying, "I'm sorry, please forgive me," over and over again. Then my father said,
I am so sorry. I didn't know it was like that. I'll do anything. Anything you need, I'll help. Just please forgive me."
But of course, it's not something you can just forgive, and I had no intention of doing so. Still, since he said he'd do anything, I told him. Then pay all the child support you owe, and when each of your 3 kids turns 16, I want to meet them, one-on-one, just us. They both hesitated at first, but when I asked, "Then it's okay if I tell your employees and neighbors everything?" they gave in. After that, I sent over the paperwork, and he transferred the money right away. He said he couldn't pay all of it at once, though, so we agreed he'd send it in installments. I knew that with installments, there was a chance he might stop paying, but I made it clear, if he missed a single payment, I wouldn't hesitate to expose everything. I told him I'd share the details of their affair and all the proof I had, not just with the people around them, but even at his kids' schools. After that, he promised he'd pay, no matter what. Maybe it was cruel of me to threaten them like that, but at least now I could actually go to college. Before she passed, my mom worked herself to the bone and left me some money. But I only want to use that money if I'm truly desperate. My mom got $9,000 in alimony from my father and $4,000 from the woman. But my dad never gave her a share of their assets. He acted like the alimony was enough. He even said he'd be the one to pay child support and had the paperwork drawn up by a lawyer, but he never paid a single dollar. Still, my mom never relied on him. She raised me all by herself without ever filing for seizure of his assets or demanding payment. She worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs and even did temp work when she had to. She never once applied for welfare. She just did her best. Her only wish was that I'd be able to go to college, find a stable job, and someday meet someone wonderful and live a happy life. I don't really believe in fate or fairy tale love stories, but I wanted to fulfill that wish, whatever it took, even if it meant using money from the man who hurt us. My mom worked tirelessly, barely taking a day off. She was always kind, always smiling, but she'd always been frail, and when her health started to decline, it happened fast. I told her she should go to the hospital, but she brushed it off and said she'd always been like that. Now I realized that it was because of the cost. She knew that if something serious was found, the treatment would be expensive, so she just ignored the signs her body was giving her. The illness spread through her body so quickly. By the time we realized how serious it was already too late. She must have been pushing herself right to the edge. Thinking about how she tried to hide her pain from me, how she pretended to be okay, breaks my heart. Why did she have to die while my father and that woman are still alive? I never used to think like that, but after she was gone, the thought just hit me. I didn't plan to take revenge or anything like that, but a deep hatred started rising from inside me, and I couldn't just sit with it. I had to do something. After that, I threw myself into my studies. I used the money my father had started sending me and got into the college my mom had always dreamed of for me. But living without her was unbearable. Some days I felt like I was losing my mind. Every now and then my father would reach out. He'd say things like, "Take care of yourself," as if he cared, but it was all too little too late. If I hadn't gone to confront him that day, he would have gone on living happily, having completely erased us from his memory, me and the woman he betrayed. That thought filled me with nothing but resentment. Still, I kept going. I went to class, studied hard, pushed forward. Then one day in my second year, I got a message from the woman, the one he left us for. She asked if we could meet. We sat in the back corner of a cafe, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "Can't you just forgive us already? Haven't we paid you enough?" Apparently, ever since I showed up in their lives, my father had been eaten up with guilt. He wasn't the same cheerful person anymore, and he kept saying over and over how sorry he was for what he'd done. Because of that, their children, who had now found out that their mom had destroyed someone else's family and stolen a father away, completely unraveled. All 3 of them had become impossible to handle. They wouldn't even speak to her anymore. The tension in their household was affecting their business. Customers were leaving, reviews were getting worse, and sales were dropping. She said that at this rate, they might not even be able to survive financially. Listening to her go on, I nearly laughed. They tore apart someone else's home, and now that their own life was falling apart, they wanted me to fix it? Unbelievable. The fact that they'd forgotten how their own happiness was built on someone else's suffering, that alone showed how little they ever understood. She begged me, said their family was falling apart, that if I had even a shred of conscience, I should forgive my father so he could move on, so they could move on. She wanted me to set him free. But of course I couldn't forgive them, so I said, "Well, isn't that something? Now that you have your own family, you finally understand what it feels like to have it torn apart. Did you know that after you destroyed ours, my mom raised me all on her own? Even when she got cancer, she kept working and gave everything she had to me. Maybe when you're the one suffering like she did, you'll finally understand what she went through." Then I stood up, looked her in the eye, and said, "I look forward to that day." Then I walked away. She looked at me with a face full of despair and hatred, but I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. Sometime after that, I heard that my father's business had shut down. On top of that, his family had completely fallen apart. I was told the woman, his wife, had suffered a mental breakdown and ended up in a psychiatric hospital. The children were left in his care, but people said the house felt like a funeral every day. Silent, tense, lifeless. The warmth they once had was gone. Maybe if my mom had still been alive, things would have turned out differently. But when I think about the life she had betrayed, abandoned, so I can't bring myself to feel sorry for them, I just can't forgive it. I know my father will carry the weight of guilt and regret for the rest of his life for what he did to me and what he did to her. I don't believe for a second that what I did was right, but when I remember how my mom endured it all, how she suffered and still tried to smile for me, I know I'll never regret it either. I met my husband, Ted, at the company orientation where we prepared lunch and organized the conference room together. He was kind and thoughtful, and we started dating naturally. I worked there for about a year until the people in the office started talking about us, which made me uncomfortable and led me to look for another job. A friend of mine timely started up a company and asked me to join the force. I didn't think twice about it and said yes. Ted and I continued dating, and after 2 years, we tied the knot. My friend's business was starting to stabilize by then, and I started thinking about having children. That's when Ted's adultery was found out. I couldn't believe it at first, but coming from my former coworker, Kate, who works at the same office as Ted, I had to admit the source was reliable. Ted seemed to be having an affair with a woman from his client company. The woman started dropping by Ted's office, and the two were seen together frequently. And one day, Kate saw them together in the street, walking arm in arm after work. He knew that people in the office knew about us, but now that I wasn't there, he wasn't careful that much anymore. People see things, and his coworkers are also my former coworkers. I thought about confronting him, but all I had at that point was word from Kate. He could have brushed it off easily. I decided to gather more evidence and hired a detective agency for investigation and waited for a month with a poker face. Having no idea about what I'd been doing, he wasn't careful at all. Enough evidence was collected in a month. With the help of some of my former coworkers, evidence was also gathered inside the office. Among them was a photo of the two kissing in the archive room I used to use often. I wanted to divorce him more and more each day. One night, when I had enough evidence, I told Ted we should talk. I laid out all the photos on the table. My former coworkers confirmed that you've been having an affair. These photos clearly show it. I'm filing for a divorce.
Sure, let's get a divorce as you wish.
Ted wasn't upset at all, but rather grinned as if he was waiting for this moment. Now I was upset. I didn't expect it to go like this at all. How could he stay calm like this? I thought he would at least be embarrassed or make excuses. I didn't understand what he was thinking until I heard what he said next.
Let's divide the assets now that we agree on divorce.
Huh? What are you talking about?
Don't you know? We must divide the common property equally when we divorce. So you have to give me $75,000 of your $150,000 savings.
So he thought he would get half of my savings even though he had to pay me a little compensation, which wasn't a bad deal for him. That's why he wasn't upset at all. After listening to what he had to say, I took a quarter out of my wallet and put it on the table. Ted ranted, throwing the coin at the wall. He demanded my money, so I had to educate him a little. Don't you know? The common property you're talking about means money we made together after we're married. That doesn't include the inheritance money from my mother. By the way, the balance of our joint account was about 50 cents after you put the money down on that new car last month, so here, you get 25 cents. After listening to what I had to say, Ted became pale and couldn't say anything for a moment. He looked very confused. His easy plan to get both money and his lover was now crumbling before his eyes. Now he came back to the man I knew.
Wait, hold on. I was joking about divorce. That affair didn't mean much to me. You're the only one I really love.
Couldn't he come up with something better? With all this evidence before him, that's all he could say? Of course, I had no intention of talking further with him. I just put the divorce papers on the table. He said he wouldn't agree, he wouldn't sign, so I said I would talk to his parents and tell them everything. Then he finally, reluctantly, agreed to it. Both of Ted's parents were old-fashioned, and his father in particular was strict and righteous, whom Ted was still afraid of. I knew that his parents were the ticket. I'm glad he changed his mind easily after this and practically agreed to everything I suggested. Of course, I didn't forget about his mistress. I had enough evidence on her as well and sent it to her company. She called Ted in a panic. Ted had told her that he would get substantial money from me, and she went on a shopping spree. But that money won't be coming in, and she was responsible for what she spent on herself, on top of the compensation to pay me. She soon found herself deeply in debt. Words were out in her office, which made her uncomfortable to stay there. Yet she couldn't quit either with all her debt. Her office job wasn't enough to pay it off, and she had no choice but to take a night job. With all that on the side, she and Ted couldn't continue their sweet dream, and she dumped him bitterly. Meanwhile, Ted was fired for his immorality and misconduct after he used the company's meeting room and archive room for adultery, without me doing anything to his company. Besides, some of my former coworkers who were aware of his adultery gave him cold shoulders. With my money and his lover in it, his pipe dream didn't last long. After being fired and incurring debt, he must be shocked, and I feel sorry for him, although he deserves all the debt he owes. Our apartment was affordable only with both of our incomes, and he couldn't afford it by himself. Now he had lost his job and had to terminate the lease quickly, so he moved into an old apartment and worked at the gas station at night and at the construction site during the day. He couldn't hide his divorce very long from his parents either. They cut ties with Ted after his relative told them the details. After losing everything, Ted came to me begging.
I'll never cheat on you again! Please, take me back! You're the only one I have!
Wrong. I wasn't his for a long time. Who would reconsider a man who demands my inheritance from my mother after having an affair? He well deserves these hard labor days ahead of him. Serves him right. After all this, I invited my former coworkers to eat out, who were helpful to me. Kate, who informed me first, said she thought hard if she should tell me or not at first. But thinking about a long life ahead, she thought I deserved to know the truth, and I thanked her for that. If not for her, how much longer would I have wasted my life being deceived? Having no children with him turned out to be the best thing about my divorce. It's always the children who are put in the middle of the adult problems. But if I can have another chance to meet someone, I really want to grab happiness next time. I'm Melba, married, 25 years old, and a full-time worker. Tony and I don't have any children yet, and we both work full-time to save up for the future. My in-laws' house is a half-hour drive away, and Tony's brother Ralph and his wife Nellie live nearby. My father-in-law passed last year, and my mother-in-law, Margaret, lives in the same house alone. We all live close, and we would drop by her frequently. My father-in-law left them an inheritance of about $200,000, but Tony and Ralph decided not to touch it so Margaret wouldn't worry about her senior years. Her son's consideration moved her. Margaret and I had been on good terms since our marriage, until something happened recently. It was late fall and getting chilly day by day. Some people have been coming down with the flu, so one day I decided to check up on her after work. When I entered the house, Nellie was also visiting. Nellie and Ralph have 3 children, and Nellie is a stay-at-home mom. Frankly, I didn't like her very much. I understand it's hard to raise 3 small children, but she would say something like, "I'm jealous. You don't have to take care of children and have lots of free time to yourself." Today, too, when she saw me, "Hi, what happened to you coming over this late? You can do anything on a whim if you don't have any children, right?" I didn't react to it particularly. Then she went on, "Did you change your hair? I would never have time to go to a salon with children, but you are living like a single person." "But Melba is working full-time." "Thank you, Margaret. But Nellie didn't like it and looked annoyed. "Oh, I have to pick them up at the swimming club. I gotta run." And left. And then Margaret said, "Melba, don't worry about her. Nellie is just stressed, and she didn't mean it." I just said, "It's okay." I didn't want to bother her with the thought, but when I got home and vented to Tony, he said,
It's obvious that Nellie is jealous of you.
He said Nellie was the jealous type and didn't have many friends. She's probably jealous of me, who wears makeup and dresses well for the office and makes money. That's what he said. I'm just a regular adult who does normal things. Why do I have to listen to her sarcasm all the time? 2 months later, we were going to spend the holiday at Margaret's, but I couldn't help the negative thoughts about meeting Nellie there. But that's not an excuse not to visit in-laws for the holiday. When we got there, Nellie and Ralph weren't there. Ralph couldn't take the holiday because of his work, and Nellie was back at her parents' house with the children. I was relieved for a moment, but then Margaret started crying. We were so surprised and said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Melba, Nellie told me. How much do you owe?" I was surprised even more. What? What are you talking about? "I returned $3,000 to her, but why didn't you tell me? If you had debt before you got married, I wish you could have told me sooner." "I don't have any debt. What exactly did Nellie tell you?" And Margaret filled me in. When Nellie told Margaret about her going to her parents' house for the holiday, she mentioned, "Melba borrowed $3,000 from me." Surprised, Margaret asked her the reasons, and Nellie said, "She was having trouble with debt before she got married. I was listening to her story and ended up lending her." Believing what she told her, Margaret said, "I'll be taking care of it. Don't worry about it." And she ended up returning the money to Nellie. Both Tony and I were furious to hear all that. If that's the truth, Nellie deceived her mother-in-law and took her money. Tony and I talked about it and decided to confront Nellie a few days later. We spent the holidays there feeling unsettled. On the last day of our holidays, Tony called up Ralph and he said he'd be home that day. Nellie would be back later that afternoon, so we grabbed the opportunity to straighten things out. Ralph, not knowing anything, welcomed us warmly. It wasn't easy to bring up the subject, but Tony did what we came here for. Ralph couldn't hide the shock when he heard it all. He apologized to us and promised to return the money to Margaret. Then he confessed to us about the trouble he's been having with Nellie. He said that he's been encouraging Margaret to work even for a part-time to help with expenses, because Ralph's income was the only source to support a family of 5. But Nellie never agreed and just spent the money he earned carelessly. He also told us that Nellie would spend it all up if they were to get his dad's inheritance, which was another reason why he didn't accept it. Right in the middle of the conversation, Nellie and the children came home. Upset and angry, Ralph didn't wait for another minute and questioned Nellie. Nellie glared at me and Tony. "I told her to keep quiet, and she already told you? She can't keep secrets." Now she's angry. She admitted what she did to us, but showed no remorse. "I just wanted to have some good times for the holidays. What can you do? I know you got your inheritance from your father. It's your fault because you hid it from me." And Ralph said,
I told you I didn't take it.
But Nellie didn't believe his words, so Tony and I told her that we didn't take it either, and Nellie said, "Are you serious? What kind of stupidity is that? You can still change your mind. Just ask her to give us a share."
I thought it was the best for everybody. I would rather have Mom keep the money than you spend it like nothing. What the hell do you think of my dad's hard-earned money anyway? I'm done with you. I'm filing for a divorce.
Nellie finally shut her mouth. She didn't seem to expect this. It turned out that Ralph had been contemplating the thought for some time now. Nellie was jealous of everybody and bad-mouthed them with no intention of helping or supporting the family. He had been fed up with her and already had divorce papers ready. Nellie saw the papers already signed and got upset. "You must be kidding. Have you thought about the children?"
What you've done is a fraud. It's a crime. How could I let a criminal raise my children?
And he told her that he would raise the children. Then Nellie said this, crying. "Please don't do this. Without child support, I can't make a living." It was all about money for her up until the end. The three of us didn't know what to say to her anymore. Afterward, Ralph kicked Nellie out of the house and started living a new life as a family of 4, and Margaret suggested they live with her. She used the inheritance money to expand the house and welcomed Ralph and the 3 grandchildren. With Margaret's help, Ralph learned to manage his work and childcare. Margaret is happy to live with her grandchildren. About Nellie, Ralph saw her parents and told them about what led them to divorce. They were disappointed and told her not to come home. Nellie had already spent up most of their savings, and the division of assets didn't leave them much. She's been moving from motel to motel while looking for a job. Nellie's father returned the money to Margaret on Nellie's behalf, but demanded that Nellie return it to him. Since Nellie has been out of the job market for several years, she's having a hard time finding a job, which is not my concern, though. Tony and I visited the newly renovated large house and were convinced that it worked out best for Margaret.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.